There are a lot of similarities between Season 1 and Season 3 of True Detective. We have a pair of detectives that like to talk on long car rides, one of which is an antinatalist with a past as a badass, and the other is a less thoughtful, more go with the flow kind of guy. We have multiple time periods, and in one time period, the main character is interviewed about the past. But in order to really understand what's going on in Season 3 of True Detective, we should probably focus more on the differences between Season 1 and Season 3. One of the most glaring differences between Season 1 and Season 3 is the prominent role that media plays in Season 3. Season 1 gave us a brief glimpse of a newspaper headline and the tail end of a press conference, but in Season 3 we see references to a movie star,
I remember it was the day Steve McQueen died.
a TV show, a book, Playboy, Dungeons and Dragons, the news media at large, and a poetry reading. And this is all within the first episode. Later on, we see a porn shop, references to comic books,
I like Batman and Silver Surfer.
a couple of press conferences, toys, references to Star Wars, Donahue, and the Jungle Book.
All except Mowgli.
To understand what Pizzolato is saying about media, we should listen to Hayes' general rule.
General rule is everybody's lying.
And even though everybody's lying, they're not lying all the time.
Period. First impression, though, no. I did not believe he was fabricating, not about this.
He seems to be saying that in our role as media consumers, we should be reflective and have a sophisticated understanding of what's being fed to us.
It's worth noting, I think, his motivations.
This is similar to a point Paul Fussell is making in The Great War in Modern Memory, a book that shares a title with the first episode of this season.
Things that occasion skepticism in me. It's partly like the irony that I announced and decorated in The Great War in Modern Memory.
Is there a common thread among all your writing?
Yeah, I think it's skepticism. Skepticism.
Fussell's book is about how the myths of the Victorian age, about courage and nobility, were shown to be false in the horrors of the First World War. Fussell wrote in the context of the Vietnam War, and one of the important points he makes in the book is how we use political boogeymen to dehumanize our opponents, even in domestic politics.
Politics, for example, which is the rhetoric of politics is always celebration or condemnation of somebody else, but it never recognizes that the speaker is as faulty as the faulty thing he points to.
And this theme of politics and cultural divisiveness runs throughout the season.
The old boss got real vocal around then.
Gerald Kent had an election coming up the next year.
If you're a Democrat, don't tell me.
Everybody knows you got something happening in it. Bums, junkies, queers meet up out there.
Well, I'm interested in the intersectionality of marginalized groups within authoritarian and systemic racist structures.
I'm a feminist. They want to sell me a piece of ass, they got the right. Shit.
We even get a person wearing a thinly veiled reference to a MAGA hat beating up the town scapegoat. While some people will accuse me of being part of the deep state for saying so, the Franklin conspiracy mentioned in episode 2 is basically the 1980s version of Pizzagate, except with Republicans as the bad guys instead of Democrats. The Franklin case is regarded as emblematic of the media's willingness to hype up outrageous allegations for their own benefit. And this was responsible for letting the hoax go out of control, so far out of control that people are still posting about it today in our conspiracy. This all leads to an argument that the media has selfish incentives that we need to be aware of.
You're paid to think that, right? You're lifting yourself up on people's bad luck. I think you use people. Like we're all stories to you, and you use them to make yourself bigger than us.
Media preys on our willingness to believe sensational things, to look for something to blame. I think Pizzolato is making a point that it's in our animal nature as hunter-trackers to form these stories that have a monster, which we are hunting at the end.
Like a lot of dreams. There's a monster at the end of it.
and how being in this role, being the hunter, being the detective, in some ways suits his nature much more.
He's like a pathfinder. Tracks wild boar for fun.
And because we're always hunting for something at the end, we easily misinterpret things and assume bad intentions when there actually are none.
Shit, you're pretty good at this. I can see you being a real dog.
That's down to you. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Part of the solution is to stop our animal instincts from leading us to a bad conclusion, and Pizzolato seems to suggest this with the prayers that we hear from the religious characters.
God, save me from my judgments and prophecies. My need to control.
And he tells us today, the reading from Malachi, justice is not ours to deliver. Justice is not in our power. It is in his.
But being passive isn't the solution that Pizzolato recommends. Just sitting back and letting things happen to you denies your agency.
Everything's just happening to you. You're this grown man with no agency of his own. Fate just keeps throwing him curveballs.
I think a large point Pizzolato is making in the season is that both children and the aged have agency, even though they are similar in having less access to the past due to failing memory and youth.
People don't remember being babies. Good, we get to revisit this stage at the end.
You imagine two old motherfuckers like us doing anything other than pissing our pants?
Pizzolato repeats that Hayes is reflecting on the past for the first time in his life in the 2015 time period.
Did you think you could just go on and never once have to look back?
One of the reasons Wayne has been able to move forward in life past his experiences in the war is that he's not naturally reflective on the past. And he has spent the vast majority of his life never acknowledging them and never looking back at them. And now he has to look back and he has to try to own his ghosts.
His eventual ability to resolve the case in the 2015 time period will show how this reflection has let him grow and overcome his past obstacles to come to the eventual conclusion of the show.
It's too big for that political bullshit.
It ain't bullshit to the man. You ever learned that, you wouldn't have been on a desk last 10 years.
This is Pizzolato's message for the season. Media has a great potential to manipulate us, but ideally media and culture serve as a way for society to preserve a collective memory that goes beyond the limits of our simple biology.
Yeah, of course I remember.
Even though we lose memory as we age, even though people pass away and take their memories with them,
People do that, miss. Most people I ever knew are gone.
we can use culture and media to reflect on the past, learn from the mistakes that were made, and grow. Well, that was it for literary analysis, but some of you may be wondering what this implies for predictions on events in the show.
What's it mean?
Well, let's start with the safest prediction. Given that the Great War in modern memory is largely about how medals and the idea of courage, nobility, and heroism are somewhat fake,
If you had a medal, if you ever wore a medal in front of the troops, you could count on being ridiculed. And that just wasn't done at all, because all that had been exposed as fraudulent from the First World War.
it seems safe to predict that Hayes is about to be made to look like a hero in 1980, but then somehow deflates this public image.
And I further hope, officer, that you might use this new role to redeem an unfortunately stunted career.
Moreover, the theme of misperception, willingness to look for boogeymen, and false hype and media incentives leads me to believe that the main crime of the season will simply turn out to be an accident of some sort.
I started thinking Will's death. Could it have been an accident?
We already see Hayes go through a miniaturized version of the plot when he panics in Walmart.
State police, lock down the store now. I'll make an announcement. Give me the mic.
Oh, sir, I don't think that you...
Give me the mic!
Hey!
Where were you?
I don't know. They were giving out chips in one place, and I stopped to eat some, and yeah, we're gone.
That's when it all started with the town. This panic. Everybody was scared. That included us.
If instead of being victims, the children ran away themselves, it would speak to the theme of agency in the elderly and children, which Pizzolato seems to be putting into this season. If this theory is correct, it would explain why Pizzolato seems to incorporate a fake literary reference in the show.
Fate just keeps throwing him curveballs. How awful for you, these trials and vicissitudes. Look it up.
I tried. There doesn't seem to be any there.
There's no there.
One source cited as a possible match doesn't work if you include the word these in the phrase, these trials and vicissitudes. I think it's very clever for Pizzolato to include a wild goose chase after a fake literary reference in his story about a wild goose chase after a fake murder. Leave a comment below to tell me if you agree with my prediction for how the season will turn out, or just to let me know what I should analyze next. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.